I need to preface this little rant that I'm about to do. I'm not a scholar of the Qur'an or the Hadith, and I'm not fluent in Arabic. So, what I'm going to do is make sure that anything that I mention will have Arabic and English in it. Okay? All I know is whatever the majority of liberal American Muslims would know. I know a few prayers, I know the five pillars, I know a general bio of the Prophet Muhammad, I know a bunch of core ideas, but what I do know is enough to scare me. I cannot stress enough how important it is for everyone to understand some of the things about Islam that people don't often mention. There are a couple of things that make Islam different from every other religion on the planet. And I'm going to tell you the ones that I know about right now. There was a hadith that I mentioned in a past video. It goes, "The intercession of a martyr will be accepted for 70 members of his family." Now that means if someone wants to become a martyr, he or she can be able to bring 70 people to paradise too. Now imagine you've done some ugly things in private, or you just weren't the most devout Muslim in the neighborhood. Imagine that you're scared that people will find out that you or one of your family members did something haram, right? That basically means not kosher in our jargon. Imagine that you had a choice. You can risk the chance that you and some of your loved ones will be separated from each other for eternity in the afterlife because of some indiscretion in the past. Or you can find an adversary who can be sacrificed and just let Allah sort it all out. I mean, if that person that you kill is a good person, then you just sent yourself and that other person to heaven, right? And you bought a get out of hell free card for everyone else in your family. Just in case one of your loved ones may not have been a perfect Muslim either. Now, what desperate Muslim wouldn't take the jihad offer? Again, people don't mention this. Now there's another part too. 24:55 says, "Allah has promised those of you who believe and do righteous deeds that He will surely bestow power on them in the land, even as He bestowed power on those that preceded them, and that He will firmly establish their religion which He has been pleased to choose for them, and He will replace the security of the state of fear that they are in. Let them serve me and associate none with me in my divinity. Whoso thereafter engages in unbelief, such indeed are the ungodly." Typical boilerplate stuff, right? The infidel are no good, and you're the chosen people. So now you have a group of individuals always feeling that there's some infidel among them that needs to submit to the will of Allah. And all the time, you're seeing in the media, all over the world, all kinds of iniquities from the Western world. There's always some American thing bothering you. At least that's how it's being displayed. And you think to yourself, well, what if these people who go to a concert one day in Manchester won't submit to the will of Allah? Or what if these people at the supermarket will go their entire lives and never become Muslim? What harm will it do in the long run, if I simply eliminate a threat and make room for the caliphate that's going to come? I mean, it's a foregone conclusion in the minds of these people that Allah is coming to bring a caliphate. That's what's being promised. It's a no-brainer to them. Think about mixing those two passages together, though. You'll always have an adversary. There will always be someone around, some excuse for you to commit jihad. The temptation's always there, you see. Now, here's the thing. I am not saying that Muslims all over the world think these things, but there are enough of them who don't necessarily blame all suicide bombers or who would snitch on every terrorist organization. You think I'm lying? Check the polls out there. I won't even leave links to those surveys because people will try to discredit them and say that I'm trying to do something out of context. I challenge you, don't believe me, I challenge you to find a single study where less than 7% of a Muslim population thinks that suicide terrorism is sometimes justified. Anywhere in the world, anytime in history. Try to find one. I hope you do, because 7% of 1.5 billion people, that's a scary number. I don't even need to remind you about the child marriage situation. You can go watch my Invisible Harvey video for that. But see, here's the thing. That's the tip of the iceberg. And already, that's enough to wreak havoc on a young mind, especially a young man's mind. Think about that. Those two passages, just those two. Oh, did you eat pork once? Did you look at a dirty video? Did you think too much about doing something haram? Well, why waste your time worrying about whether or not you're a perfect Muslim when you can be the best possible one? Why worry about your family joining you in the next life when you can just ensure that they'll be with you on the other side? And then there's something called the jizya. Now, most folks in the Western world, most folks who don't know Islam very well, aren't even aware of this. But according to the Qur'an, chapter 9, verse 29, and also the hadith collection that's called Sahih Muslim, the 19th book, hadith 4294, a jizya is basically a tax that Muslim countries take from non-Muslim people as a sort of protection money. You see, if you pay them, the Muslims will leave you alone. Nice little church you got here. Would be a shame if somebody went over here and bothered it. And if you don't pay, well, let's just hear it from the Qur'an itself. Those who do not believe in Allah and the last day, even though they were given the scriptures, and who do not hold as lawful that which Allah and His Messenger have declared to be unlawful, and who do not follow the true religion, fight against them until they pay tribute out of their hand and are utterly subdued. And a hadith. If they refuse to accept Islam, demand from them the jizya. If they agree to pay, accept it from them and hold off your hands. If they refuse to pay the tax, seek Allah's help and fight them. Religiously sanctioned racketeering. Built right into the religion. And I know, you're not going to see that in England or Denmark or Scandinavia or something, but that's what's waiting for anyone who wants to oppose a caliphate in the future. You want to fight the fight? Well, you better know what's coming. Do you see why this is dangerous? Because, see, yeah, the Old Testament has crazy, awful things in it. And yes, in the Bible, there's slavery being acceptable, and homosexuality is condemned, and there's racism and misogyny, and yet there are fanatics all over the world. But when you've got a religion that puts a world domination game plan in its books, and then says it's okay to fight someone and kill yourself doing it because you can bring your family with you to heaven, you got a totally different religion than what's seen in the world today. Now, I should explain the Quran and the Hadith a little bit. I waited because it's important for me to explain it here. I want you to think of the Quran as something like the Old Testament, the Gospels, the Book of Acts, that piece of Christianity. And the Hadith are a little bit like the epistles of the Bible. So basically the Hadith are these these huge collections of things that were dictated by various people who were close to Prophet Muhammad about things that Prophet Muhammad did and said. By the way, a lot of them come from the 9-year-old girl that he married, Aisha, oddly enough. Check it out, it's very interesting. So here's the thing. The epistles of Peter, John, James, Jude, Paul, all those guys, they're all directed towards specific groups of people. The letter to the Corinthians, the Romans, the Galatians, etc. And most of them are just explanations and pronouncements and arguments against various groups and even with each other. The Hadith, however, for most Muslims, not all, but the lion's share, the Hadith are the example that Muhammad set for people to follow. See, no one says that Moses or Jesus are supposed to be emulated fully. Like, no one expects you to part the Red Sea or walk on water at some point. That's not in the cards. But the Hadith is this codified embodiment of what Muhammad wants people to be, no matter who you are. And there's no wiggle room to say, okay, well, we're merely human and we should accept the fact that we're broken, you see. You can't just do what the Prophet Muhammad says. Either you strive to be like him, or you aren't doing Islam right. The example set by Muhammad, his actions, his ideas, this is often what's called the Sunnah. Now, you might have heard of the Sunni Muslims. That's the denomination of Islam that's always fighting against the Shia Muslims in the Middle East. You might hear about the sectarian violence, but that's what they're talking about. Well, the Sunni Muslims are proud of how they follow the Sunnah, the example, because that's how they got their name. The Sunnah informs the Sunni Muslims. They believe very strongly that you cannot deviate from Muhammad's example. It doesn't matter what the Hadith say, you have to follow that straight line or else. And guess what? There are more Sunni Muslims in the world than any other religious denomination. Any other denomination. More than Catholics, more than Eastern Orthodox, anybody. There was a Pew Research Center study in 2009. It estimated that at the very least, 80% of the world's 1.57 some odd billion Muslims are Sunni. Think about this. That's over 1.25 billion people who think that Prophet Muhammad, the guy who said this, and this, and this. This guy, okay? He's the example to follow. 1.25 billion people at least. Now, I'm not saying that there are a billion people out there ready to lie and murder and rape and everything at the drop of a hat. I'm not saying that. I'm saying something far more frightening. I'm saying there are a billion people out there who may never want to do those things, but they're never going to be allowed to admit it. Can you fathom the pain that these people have when they have to pretend that they don't find Prophet Muhammad to be this warmongering psycho-pedophile, that they don't disagree. Every day, they have to use him as the personal example or else. And if you disagree with them, well, let's just hope they don't have a family member who's literally dying to get to heaven.